Hey, and welcome back. I had a few technical problems, so today's is going to be a bit longer than I usually like to make them. So with all this extra time, I'm going to talk a little bit about the art, a little bit about Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse, not just what I thought about the movie, but also the art behind that as well. I did this piece a while after I did the Wonder Woman piece. I kind of knew after I saw Wonder Woman that moving forward I would want to see the movies before drawing something for them, just to enjoy it a little bit more, maybe dig deeper into the story, choose elements more wisely, and so on. I found that on an art piece level, it didn't matter so much. With social media and advertising, I get a pretty good feel for what something is going to look like, and what those critical style choices or character poses are. After all, that's what advertising is for, to give you the best sample taste of the movie. On just a fun level, though, it does make a pretty big difference to do something for a movie that you've seen and enjoyed. So I'm glad this series led me to that. If I was doing more elaborate pieces, I may have needed more for the art side, but as it just meant some good old summer movie nights. The entire movie as a whole was remarkable as far as art goes. By now, I'm sure you've seen loads of articles and chatter about the in-house software they developed and all the trouble they went through to make things look the way they do in that film. Those sources are much better equipped to explain it, so I think I'll leave it to them. And if you're interested in details, I highly recommend diving down that rabbit hole. The basic gist of it for now is that the artists put a lot of work in, and it shows. But the scene that really stood out to me and was just so beautiful and colorful and could not possibly have a real-life film equivalent was the end boss fight in the Collider. It's just explosions of colors and shapes and textures, and it really celebrates the freedom and abilities of animation. At the very end, like end credits kind of end, there's a screen that says, "Anyone can wear the mask." And above all else, that was the best thing to take away from that movie. It especially hit home with what I'm trying to do with this series of kids playing imaginary games, being their own favorite heroes. Anyone can wear the mask, anyone can join in. These stories, they're just that, stories. They're made-up worlds with imaginary people doing the stuff of fantasies. I feel like kids get that. They play imaginary games all the time, or at least I did as a kid. But that reminder as an adult means something so much more now. It's such a succinct way of saying not to judge people too quick, and to let people be the heroes they want to be, as long as they're willing to work for it and fight for it. Even better, it's a reminder to yourself that you can be extraordinary too. Anyone can wear the mask. Quite a common question I get from friends and family and other people who learn what I do is, does it ruin movies for you, or are you just thinking about work the whole time? Or variations of that. Some people think it may enhance it. You learn to appreciate all the tricks, but you still enjoy the final outcome. Some people think it means I can't watch anything without tuning out of work thoughts. The truth lies somewhere in between. For this movie, it was definitely in the first camp of not only appreciating the movie just on a storytelling and fun factor, but knowing about animation and illustration and movie making, that made it even more fantastic. When this first came out and everyone was raving about it, I was skeptical. It kind of reminded me of the way that people reacted to James Cameron's Avatar, where the best parts about that movie ended up being all the parts you couldn't see, behind the scenes. I also didn't find Avatar quite that remarkable off the big screen. It doesn't stand up to multiple viewings, and it didn't make me want to watch it again. I would, however, watch Spiderverse again, and for anyone who knows me, that is high praise. I don't like watching movies to begin with, so being willing to watch it again says a lot. I understood why it was getting all the praise and why people couldn't stop talking about it. They really were doing an animation that hadn't been seen before, and it's very hard to do with the technology that had come before it. Thus why they made their own. Usually, as those art technologies evolve, they do so in a way that the average audience member isn't going to notice, and it's not in such an eye-catching fashion that advertises that evolution. In the case of the Spiderverse, they were working on a way to fuse the flavors of 2D comic book art into a 3D world. This was something that was already kind of in some 3D softwares, but it wasn't good. That's why it wasn't seen a lot. Now, with all the steps that art technology has taken, we get to indulge in these phenomenal displays of what the humans behind the art are capable of. As for this slightly more quaint display here, I was enthralled with that anyone can wear the mask mentality. This is the only one in this little collection that has 2 kids, and I chose to include 2 because this story really warranted that. This was a story that treasured the idea of teamwork and how diverse that can look. I chose to include something a little bit imperfect in all of these pieces, bring them back to reality while still staying super. So for Wonder Woman, it was her glasses, and for this piece, I just swapped genders. It's something small and something that in today's culture is either a matter of contention or completely normal, depending on what kind of crowd you run with. But having worked in retail and seen how many kids were told they couldn't get certain toys because they weren't for their gender, it's an outlook I think needs a little more love. Anyone can wear the mask, right? I chose to focus on Spider-Gwen and Miles Morales. Spider-Gwen was my favorite, and yes, that is because she was the prettiest and the smartest. In that order. Deal with it. Miles Morales was a delightful take on Spider-Man as well. As you're probably already aware, I'm not the biggest fan of the comic universe, so there's a lot more to all these characters and worlds that I don't get to see in the movies that I'm just now watching. So from the sidelines, having only seen bits and pieces or references and advertisements related to the typical Peter Parker Spider-Man, I never imagined a Miles Morales. I loved that he is a bumbling idiot, and that he's into graffiti, and he comes from a diverse family, and he struggles to learn his powers. The art of the movie was also echoed in showing Miles' artistic escapades. So all around, this movie just showcased art. The difference for me with this movie, and I think why I'm not mad that everyone is raving about the art and super tired of hearing of it, is because the story was also deeply enjoyable. As much as I can love some good artwork, the message still has to be worthwhile. This hit the mark, and I'm excited for the sequel. Spider-Gwen's style of movement is all about grace, agility, and bringing a ballet flavor to the Swingers Club. Yeah, sure, let's call the Spidey crew the Swingers Club. Nothing weird about that at all. So Gwen's poses are all beautiful and extended, but still quite dynamic. She's still a superhero, after all, gotta strike those poses. Miles' style of movement is the exact opposite. Very clumsy, somewhat confused. He still doesn't know what to do with himself. I wanted to keep those attitudes in this piece. Just like with Wonder Woman, the color choice was already pretty much made for me. I was just going by what the characters wore, but altering the style of the costume, so instead of a full-on Spidey suit, it was just casual clothes that give the taste of the character, as you can do with imaginary games. Miles' suit presented a unique opportunity with this setup, where a homemade version of the Spidey suit would actually match the real deal in the movie, since he painted it himself. Or at least the logo part could be the same. Just once again driving home that idea that anyone can wear the mask. Or Spidey suit, in this case. The background, as always, I had some trouble with. I did actually go in with a plan this time. I had been really drawn to the Super Collider scene with all the colors. I was trying to look up reference pictures for it and found a really cool poster of Miles in that environment, and full disclosure, it looks pretty close to what I've got here, or at least the big yellow block part is. If I can find it again, I'll link it below. The rest, I wasn't trying to copy that poster, I was just trying to splash a lot of color and texture and movement on there. This goes back to the idea that I talked about last time of fan art and learning from pieces that were already done, seeing how other artists do it. I definitely tried to change it up a bit, make it mine, and make it fit with what I had on my piece, instead of trying to replicate exactly what was in that poster. Backgrounds are an area that I'd really like to learn more about and get better with. I feel bad for even looking up other pieces and looking how other artists handled that collider environment. But I do feel like I learned a lot from this practice, and it will help me do more original things in the future. Something new I tried in this piece was rim lighting, and ultimately I just nixed that and cut it out and replaced it with a more simplified effect. I was told a fancy name for that thing where the colors don't line up and you get this echo of another color, but I can't seem to find that term right now. Is it chromatic dispersion? That does not seem right. Future me, you can suffer knowing that you can't fix this now. Even if you find the answer, you can't help me in my current recording. Enjoy your knowledge. Anyway, whatever it's called, I just duplicated the character in their entirety and changed that copy to a solid pink to create a tidier effect. I also did the same in the other direction, but changed the fill of the layer to 0% and used a stroke effect to get a really clean yellow outline. These visual echoes, as I keep calling them, just punch up the action a little more and play with that effect that you get from old TVs and movies where the image isn't quite as clean or doesn't line up quite as perfectly as things do now. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how this one came out. I think it is unmistakably Into the Spiderverse themed, and it's nice to feel like I hit the target for that at least. Looking back as I'm making these videos, I think Wonder Woman is a bit more successful. As I mentioned in that one, it just had a few more opportunities to play with the toys and the homemade costume a little bit more, and that piece was a little bit less busy than this one is. The Wonder Woman one feels a bit more classic to me, whereas this one feels a bit chaotic. And even though that's kind of the vibe of Into the Spider-Verse, it's not so much the vibe I tend to shoot for in my pieces. So I can see why I favor the other one. As for the movies themselves, I loved both of them, but in very, very different ways. I really don't think I could choose which movie was better. I'm looking forward to both sequels, and I'd be happy to watch either one of them again. As for the behind the scenes and the bonus features, I would rather learn more about Wonder Woman. Shocking, I know. And that's really just because I'm around art and animation and illustration so much that learning more about it in my spare time just isn't what I always want to do. Because Wonder Woman is live action and a very respectable amount of practical effects, it keeps my attention a little bit better. But at this point, we're really splitting hairs. So that just about does it for this piece and this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you sat through all of that, thank you for your time. Thank you for watching, and let me know what you liked about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse down in the comments. Thanks again, and I hope to see you next time.